This video is a compilation of several lessons. Each of them involves the teaching practices that support ongoing changes in student thinking. We use these segments to demonstrate two important features of these teaching practices. First, each of the lessons centers on one dimension of the anchoring event. The students will investigate ideas like the roles of producers, consumers, and decomposers in an ecosystem, or how energy is transferred in an ecosystem, or how different populations of animals acquire specific nutrients for survival, or the cycling of carbon in an ecosystem. Bethany will eventually require that students use all these ideas in their final models and explanations. The second important feature of this series of lessons is that Bethany will use a similar structure for supporting sense-making in each. She will introduce a new idea, provide sense-making experiences for the students, incorporate what they learn into a public record like the summary table, and in the process, connect the lesson's new idea to the anchoring event.
But you are not the one that wrote it, but you'd like to add to the idea, please say it now. Everybody else could, if you hear something that you agree with, add it to your notes so that you have something to be thinking about as we continue today. Use energy Who is the writer for this?
Me.
Okay. So could somebody else explain what Anthony was thinking here?
Energy from the food.
No, the energy goes to the
parents food, and they get the energy, and then they break it down to get the energy. And then the predators, just like the same for the predators, the bears, and they break it down to get
Okay. And then what I want you to think about is what do they actually do with the energy in each of these kind of levels that you're showing. So you're saying they're getting energy, but then does all of the energy go from here to there? So think about maybe how much goes and what goes. So you kind of are thinking now, where does energy come from and where it goes, but what about what is it used for?
Motion energy.
Oh, okay, so it uses it to move.
Oh, she said it. Well, that's escape the coyote.
Write that one down and then see if you can come up with other things that it does. And as you talk, I'll add some of your ideas and we'll see if we can put them all together into a class explanation of this, because I think that a lot of you already have a lot of knowledge about how this works. So, if we could start with Jasmine's group, so if you could show what you've drawn, and then whoever from your group is going to talk about what you said.
And it's using all the energy to grow and create pollen, which then the bee carries to help it properly.
Then it goes to the hair. The hair eats it and gains the energy. Later on, it goes to the lynx. The lynx eats the hair and don't let it stay. Then the lynx gets the energy, and then the lynx would use it for things, reproducing, having energy to hunt more prey.
And then, Alan, you used a different word for that.
What?
You said it wasted some of the energy?
Did I?
Yeah. So you said it was like wasted, as in it's not getting passed along?
I don't even think that's happening. I don't think like necessarily waste, like the energy was going away.
Oh, so you don't think wasted is what's happening?
No.
Okay, I won't write it down. All right, thank you.
Energy, and then the predator eats the bunny, or the bunny dies, or the predator dies, and then there's a decomposer, so it breaks down that bunny, and sometimes the flower needs the nutrients from the ground, and it breaks down to the ground, and the bunny and the predator.
So what we're going to do is kind of just do an activity that's going to use what you already know here, which is our group knowledge, and just add a little bit more detail to it and help us think a little bit more about what the energy is being used for, and also help us think a little bit more about this: how is energy lost, how much energy is being transferred. But what we're going to do is act out these levels and how energy flows. So I need all whiteboard markers put away, and whiteboards put away also, please.
I don't care.
I know, but you have to put it on the
We are currently going through this, trying to provide energy needs for plants and carnivores in the winter.
What are you guys?
We are the same.
Let's take a look at our cups. What else are they using the energy units for? Okay, so which ones of these energy, well, maybe you can think about that. I also want you to think about what energy gets passed along to the carnivores. Otherwise, what happens to the energy? So that's something that you can be thinking about as you're waiting for your energy to come. What is happening to the energy? So kind of like in our entry question, where does the energy, what happens to the energy in the herbivore? Where does it go? What does it do?
Uno, right?
Okay.
Something interesting.
I don't know.
Education, we gotta ask them what's going on. They finally got some seeds.
So what's going on? What is happening when you're putting the beans inside the cups?
So for growth and repair, we're only putting one in there. Respiration for breathing.
So why do you need two for some and only one for others?
Because some require more energy than others. Like dying requires one because it's not very hard to die.
I see.
How much energy the plants, how many bags of energy are on your tally marks? 29. Okay, they had 29 total. And then how much energy here? One bag.
That was mine.
Okay. And then over here we have one bag. They got one bag, but they only got one total, so they didn't even fill up their biomass cup. So we can consider that like 1/10 of
An energy.
like a unit, like a bag of energy. And then I heard some of you talking a little bit about who was doing the most work here. So the plants. Some of you think the plants were doing a lot of work.
I would like to say the sun.
What were doing? What were the plants doing that whole time?
Giving energy to like different things.
Okay. And can you tell everybody what the plants are using energy for?
To grow.
To grow. What else were plants using energy for?
Reproducing.
Reproducing. What else?
Cellular respiration.
Cellular respiration. What else?
Biomass.
Sunlight, biomass, photosynthesis, death, and growth and reproduction.
Okay. Yeah. So they were using energy for all those things, and then they passed along their energy. What kind of energy did they pass along?
Biomass.
Chemical.
So Cecilia says it's biomass. And Richard, can you say a little bit more about what biomass means?
I don't know what it means.
Well, you just said chemical energy. Why did you say chemical energy?
For the plants, because they transfer chemical energy to like us, I guess.
Okay, so it's chemical stored energy that they're passing along to you. Okay, and then I think Anthony said something about what was happening here, about why the plants were working so hard.
Oh, because when it transfers to one place to another, it's not 100% efficient. So they don't get like exactly how much all the energy we get, like they only get a portion of it.
Okay, so we saw that really clearly here, that only a portion of the energy was getting passed along. And then I think Richard had something to add to that, about what you noticed about this.
The energy thing? Like energy efficiency?
Oh, so you're thinking about efficiency also. Okay, boss?
I noticed we only got 1/10 each time we went back and forth in between the two from the sun to the plant
Okay.
for biomass.
So you notice that the amount of energy he got versus how much he passed along was only 1/10, only 10% of the energy. Okay, I wanted to do another round where we added decomposers. What is this data? What does it mean? What does it represent? Well, you were saying it was a multiple of 10. Remember, you said.
No, earlier, when? Before class.
What does this data show us or tell us? There's more, like, say more about that. What do you mean?
I don't know how to explain it. I don't know.
So you said there's more. More what? So she says there's more energy. You were actually, I think, thinking about the number of... Oh, so you were thinking about the energy units, you weren't thinking about the actual number of the predators?
I was just looking up there.
Okay. All right, so, okay. I do want to think about that, though, because I wonder if energy is related to the number of the actual plants. Do you think it is? Why?
Oh, it was going to the plant.
Okay, I want you to see if you can write down your ideas so we can talk about it.
Well, I talked about how plants made over 200 sources of food, but when it came down all the way down to the carnivores, they only got about two meals out of that. And I said that showed that even though they're eating the food, some of the energy is lost in the process.
Okay.
Through things like running or using up energy to get that food.
Okay, so they're using energy.
And that's why so much of it is gone by the time they actually get the energy back.
Okay. And then I also want you, because you were a carnivore, right? All right, so I want you to think about maybe, we're going to discuss this a little bit more, but why was it okay for you to only have one meal while the herbivores had to have lots of meals? So maybe you two can discuss that after. Oh, you're saying it here, that they have to eat more things?
Yeah.
Who has to eat more things?
Like the carnivores.
So discuss that. Okay. Because what do you think she means by eat more things?
I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about everything.
Why? What made
I don't know, I'm confused.
So what I told her was, I said that like even though the plants made like over 200 sources of food and such, the carnivores only got about 2 meals worth of that food. And that it's only 2 meals worth.
Yeah.
And I said that maybe during the process of obtaining the food, that most of it is lost through wasting energy, like trying to catch the food.
Like they use up energy so they don't have as much energy to give off to the next thing.
Right, and then
That's what I was trying to say. I just don't know how to write it.
So what did you guys talk about? Because I see everyone writing, so are you all writing the same thing? So what are you writing, Michelle? Number 3.
Wallace said it was inefficient for the biomass pass on all the way through them because the predator, that the thing that is eating the predator is using half of it.
Using half of it? What do you mean? She just said that you said something about using half of something.
What I was saying is that the predator only gets 10% of the energy from its predator, so it has to eat.
So what do you mean by it uses 10%? So like, let's say I'm the carnivore, I'm the lynx, and I eat a yummy hare.
You'd only get 10% of what the hare had because the hare used the other energy.
Okay. So, because the way I first heard it, I thought you were saying, like, if I ate that hare, I was only getting 10% of the energy in me from the hare. And is that not related to what you're saying? So I guess a question I'm thinking about is, like, if I eat a cheeseburger, how much of that energy am I storing? Based on this simulation, because
there were a total of 10 energy units used and only 1 for biomass.
okay. And you'll see, if you look closely, the lettuce. This says 1/6 of a medium head of lettuce. It has 1 gram of protein.
It smells like lettuce in here.
And 2 grams of carbohydrates. So my question for you is, where do you think lettuce gets protein? How does it have protein in it? And how does it get carbohydrates?
In this lesson, Bethany wants her students to understand the molecular basis of biomass transfer in an ecosystem and the transfer of energy. These ideas can be powerful tools for extending students' reasoning about living systems. She then has them do a reading and answer questions about the carbon and nitrogen cycles. And, as is typical, she'll have the students add to their cumulative record of ideas on the summary table. Students will negotiate with Bethany what they learned that day and also how it helps them think about their hypotheses concerning the hare population.
So I want you all to actually stop writing and take a look at this equation right here that is showing what's happening in the plant. So it says 6 carbon dioxide, so 6 of these go into the plant. And then 6 of these go into the plant. And then what does it say happens?
I could just put it back and put it back. Snitch on it. Oh, it's like that.
Does this just stay in the plant forever like this?
Throw it away and trying to help me out.
Okay, so how would you make that happen if you had these in the plant?
You saw it on my back.
Yeah, and so that's what we want to think about when we're thinking about the carbon cycle, that when it goes into the plant, you're breaking down the molecules and recombining
What if
them.
me and you started an operation like that?
Does that make sense, Hal? Okay, so can you kind of describe what Jasmine said?
They both go into the plant, and 6 of carbon, CO2, and then 6 of water, and then they go together. They're added together. They have to break down and like combine each other.
To make what?
You get beavers?
To make the carbohydrates. So, or other things in the plant. Carbohydrate is one thing you can make with carbon. Alright, so now can you explain it? So what has to happen to these in the plant?
What did you say?
So what I'd like you to do is take maybe about 20 minutes to get with your group and find your poster and use your model to show how energy flows in the ecosystem. Use your model to show carbon and nitrogen cycle in that ecosystem. And then remember, we can use these post-its, green, yellow, and pink, to say what you're adding, revising, or new questions that you have. Oh, you're going to add nitrogen and carbon to your poster?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so I want to see, like, I often see that the poster's pointing towards this half of the table. So I want to make sure we also have this half of the table represented today on the... Right. More details on how we're supposed to
How do you think that connects to the plants?
Should we go over it?
This is what
And then we just, like, write it. Tell them what you added to yours and see if they added it already. What do you think they should add? Or why don't you take a look at theirs and see if they're...
Add picture, we got carbon and...
In Lesson 13, Bethany introduces information about the primary predator of the snowshoe hare, the lynx. She asks students to predict what the population cycles might look like for them and to draw it over the graph of hare populations.
This is the number of hare population, and then this is the red line of the predators. And so we decided that it would be the predators would be low and the hares is high. Wait, does that make sense? Wait,
Yeah, because they don't have enough food to eat. They don't have enough hares. Wait, over here. Wait.
see now I'm confused about it. Huh?
Confused now.
Okay, wait, it's high. Wait, it would be high. The predators would be high because they would have all the food, right? Because all the hare population would be high. But then when it starts to go down because the hare population is now all low, so they don't have as much food to get. So whenever the hare population is high, the predator population begins to go up and the hares goes down because the predators are eating them.
And then when the hare population is low, then the lynx slow because they have to eat. What would that look like on the map? With Tracy? Do you agree with that?
It can go both ways, depends on how you explain it. Kind of like both ways, but it depends on how you explain it.
That's why I didn't put tracing it, like that it would go up, down, along the same lines. I don't know if he was thinking about how many, but I think he was definitely thinking about the shape being the same.
Yeah. So then that was in contrast to what Kevin was saying, and Kevin thought that kind of like Anthony thought that it would be the lowest when the hair is highest. But I think if we push them to say, think about the availability of resources, then they should be able to connect.
But I mean, and I think that idea about is it on its way up or that kind of thing is going to be helpful, because that table, one student said, a high number of links equals a high number of hairs. And then they're like, no, because the links could eat the hair. So then they tried to like flip it, but it didn't quite work, saying it's one or the other. So I think the idea of changing could be important for some groups to feel like they can explain it well.
Well, I like the idea of changing because it helps the kids understand why these lines aren't static. They are always on the way up or always on the way down. And why are they always on the way up or always on the way down? Actually, I had to think about that myself.
Do we have the reproductive rates for the hairs?
We do.
Because some of them were wondering about, they saw that the lynx could only have up to 6 kittens. And they were saying that wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
And so...
I think the hares one, it says they could have, I don't remember.
But they have a high no. I don't know if they have a high survivability. Like what percent survive to reproduction age?
But I think the kid's point, the student's point was that...
the hares could have up to 4 litters of so they can have 16 young each year, approximately. So.
Bethany decides that she needs to have some contrasting hypotheses about the lynx population made public in order to drive students' reasoning forward. She has students estimate how the lynx population would fluctuate over time, and then asks them to superimpose these lines on the graph of the hare population.
And now what I'd like you to predict is what would happen to the lynx population over 35 years. Here. What do you think is going to happen? Do you have your paper from last time? It's a long, skinny graph. Alright, so you think it's going to be the same? Except when the hairs go up, the lynx go down. So you think it's like opposite? What?
You don't know?
Long hair. Jen drew that.
Oh, there's one.
I drew the blue line, second from the bottom, and it's supposed to follow the hares graph because when the resources are high, the lynx has high resources because that's their food sources, the hares. And then when the hares are low, the lynx population is going to be low because they don't have many resources as food.
Okay, so his idea is that if this is high, because if there's a high amount of food for the lynx, then there'd be a high number of lynxes. All right, so this red one, this is this? Okay, is this what you originally thought?
No.
Okay, so you just changed your idea?
Yeah.
Can you say why you changed it? Or what you originally
I was just
had?
thinking about it and like, what my prediction didn't make sense, so.
Okay, so you changed it. So how is yours different than Wallace's?
It's lower population.
Okay, and why did you put it lower?
I didn't think that was going to be that many birds.
Okay, so both of these two, Wallace and Kelly, think that the number of, they show on the graph here that the number of lynx is a lot lower than the number of starting point for hare. And could one of you explain, like, you said you think there will be less, but could you explain why you think there's less?
There was like 50,000 lynx, and then the hares would be gone.
Okay. Why?
Because you get used a lot.
Okay, she's saying if there's 50,000 lynx, then the hares would just be gone, because the lynx eat a lot. How many do they eat? Do you remember from the facts?
It was like 140.
Yeah, my research said they ate about 140 lynx, or a hare per year.
There's an overshoot, the first hump, and possibly the second hump. those are two overshoots because the carrying capacity would be roughly 60,000.
Okay, and so it's going beyond it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we might want to think about that. Do you think that what we've thought about before with going past the carrying capacity, overshooting that carrying capacity, and then coming back down? So that's an interesting idea to keep in mind as we go think about this more. Okay, this red line right here. Who do this one?
I just say I said there's less lynx population because if there's too much, the hare population would just go way down. So I said it's around 30,000, and when the hare population goes up, so does the lynx. Kind of like what Kelly and Paul says.
But yours is slightly different because the way you drew it, the it wasn't matched up perfectly.
No.
So can you explain why you didn't match it up perfectly?
Because it takes a while for it to adjust to having lots of hair, and then back to adjusting to low population of hares.
Okay, so I think his idea is kind of similar to what Jen was thinking about, but this adjustment, how long it takes for their population to kind of react or adjust to what the hare population was doing.
Bethany finishes her class by giving her students an actual graph of the hare and lynx populations. She uses a strategy for helping students make sense of graphs in which the x-axis is time. She asks them to create a storyline for a single point on the graph. This encourages students to focus attention just on one part of the graph, and the request for a story prompts students to talk about a trend that is not simply a high point or a low point in the population. That is, something is in the process of happening here.